pleased because that's a sign that we don't have this fatigue where people are saying, oh, let's forget about the elections. As John was saying, the well-known phrase of accept and move on. So we'd like to welcome you here today in the name of the Africa Center for Open Governance and Kenyans for Peace with Truth and Justice. As John just told you, we're here to commemorate the anniversary of the elections and the Supreme Court petition and the decision that followed it. To mark this occasion, and as part of the work we've been doing around elections, we're launching several publications which we've produced in the course of the last year as part of our series on elections. We didn't start as experts on elections or people who focus on electoral issues until we realized that there was a sensitive gap growing in terms of oversight on election issues in civil society, and this gap was made even more evident during the last elections. So we have been building up that capacity and publishing on the issue, and today we want to launch yet more publications in that series. On the table at the back you'll see publications released before the last elections, and if you're not familiar with them, you're welcome to take some with you. For today, we'll be focusing on the areas that John has mentioned, but also in terms of the theme of memory and amnesia. The Kenyans, we are known to like to forget. So one of the things we think is important to do is to record things, to compile them, to put them out in the public domain so that people don't forget. We ourselves tend to forget because we are so involved, so deeply engaged in the thickets of struggling for accountability that we sort of tend to forget just what it was like. And so this is an occasion when we can remind ourselves what we really went through and what we accomplished. Also as civil society during the last elections. So we, as civil society, worked around the elections, and we're launching publications on these issues. We're holding presentations on these issues, and we provide analysis. Why is it important to provide analysis? Because you must have an objective basis for discussion. We're a very polarized country that seems to be incapable of viewing issues objectively without putting on a political lens or an ethnic lens more like when we're looking at issues. So it's extremely important to provide facts and figures to the national debate so that we have an objective basis for discussion, for analyzing our problems, being brutally honest about what those problems are, because that's the first step towards solving them, and providing the public with a basis for engaging, which is not just emotive or sort of blind loyalty to particular interests. So this is why we do what we do. And I think in the last year, those of you who didn't know it before now know that being in civil society is not a popularity contest. If you want to be popular, go somewhere else. If you're really doing the work you ought to do as you should do it, you will find that you will arouse deep enmity. I think all of you are still remembering the onslaught against civil society, and with some of the most vile insults being hurled at us in the social media. But we keep on because we know that people would prefer to forget. But 5 years is an extremely short span of time. In fact, it's no longer 5 years. How much time is it till the next elections? 3. 2 years have gone. While we've been saying, oh, let's forget about it and just, try and make the best of a bad situation, or, my country right or wrong, etc. So it's 3 short years, and once again, we're a day late and a dollar short. So we need to keep on reminding people, keep on harping on these issues. So as I look back, I think of all the work we did around the elections, and I think of the Supreme Court petitions, and I'm still filled with disbelief at what we managed to do within the space of basically a week. And this was really something which was facilitated by people's courage and commitment. We did not have millions of shillings, billions of shillings. We could not misuse taxpayers' money in order to front our own particular interests. We relied on the voluntary efforts of dozens of people who worked day and night, and some of them are in this room, in order to put together a petition and bring it to the Supreme Court successfully. That in itself was an achievement, and it's a little known story, and one that we do have to document. As I speak about memory and forgetting, we do have to document that experience. While we're on the subject of the petition, I would like to ask Zahid Rajan to stand up. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a courageous Kenyan. At a time when not many were willing to put their names to a petition challenging the conduct of the elections, which had led to the outcome announced by the IEBC, Zahid Rajan did not hesitate when he was asked, will you sign on as a petitioner? Of course, there was no question for him. But we want to recognize his courage and the unhesitating sort of clarity and the sort of clarity of ideas and ideology that made it for him not even worth thinking about twice. So thank you, Zahid. Why did we put in a petition? Why didn't we just sort of sit back and throw up our hands and say, well, we're never going to win this thing? And it was extremely difficult to convince people that we actually were not so much doing what we were doing because we were upset about the outcome. Although I will be extremely honest, we were definitely not pleased, because the outcome meant that we had not adhered to the constitutional standards which we had set for ourselves. But that, for us, was not the main point. The main point was that we had created an institution, we had equipped it with resources. Not only the taxpayer had given it somewhere in the range of 25 billion shillings, our friends and partners from abroad had basically invested millions until the last minute in order to make sure that these elections were a success. And the IEBC was charged with conducting an accurate, verifiable, secure, accountable and transparent elections. And it was our contention that they had failed in that duty and that there should be accountability. We were coming from the experience of 2007, where there has never been any accountability. We do not know what happened to our vote in 2007, and we had a repeat of the failures in the conduct of the process that threw us back after years of efforts at reform, after millions of dollars invested. We were thrown back to the status quo ante. So where are we today after having conducted this petition? Is it a different place from 2007 after all the efforts? In 2007, we went into the elections with an electoral commission which did not have the faith of Kenyans. The judiciary also did not have the faith of Kenyans. It was known to be an extremely subservient body to the executive. The security forces were unreformed, disorganized, and partisan. And there were deep, deep divisions in the Kenyan population. Are we at a different place today than we were in 2007? Perhaps there have been some improvements, but we haven't come far enough. As far as the electoral body is concerned, it's engaged in burying its head in the sand, or perhaps manipulating the record in order to match the outcome that it announced. All of the results we've seen now have never matched each other, and we'll hear more about that. We still have, as we'll probably hear, a large amount of missing documents from the election. The primary document, which is the only proof, not the further documents, the Form 34, we still have a large amount of missing ones from the record. During the Supreme Court petition, there was a judicial tallying exercise, one which was also fraught, ironically, with many of the same problems that we'd experienced with the IEBC. And we've written complaints about this to the judiciary, and we expect answers around the judicial tallying and the truth that never really reached the Supreme Court judges, even if we assume that the Supreme Court judges took the trouble of studying the evidence. So today we've come together to look at these various issues: the conduct of the electoral process, the Supreme Court judgment, issues associated with it, and implications for the future of the judiciary and future elections. How are we to cure the problems which will be raised by the Supreme Court judgment, which in some cases seems to have legitimized illegalities? The Supreme Court judgment decision was final. We hope we'll hear from Washira some ideas of how we can actually remedy those problems. One of the things that one experienced sitting in the courtroom was the absolute one-sidedness of the process. It seems that one side was allowed to get and do everything it wanted. We sat and watched as lawyers for the first respondent and the third respondent basically insulted and humiliated lawyers for the petitioners, for the main petitioner. John, you said there were 2 petitions. There were 3, including the one on valid votes and votes cast. And in terms of the decision, again, it was a clean sweep for one side. So the impression that Kenyans came out of this with is that there was a side which was always going to have its way, and another side which was never going to have its way. Now that is not a way of creating a cohesive society in which there's belief in and adherence to democratic principles. So where does that leave us in terms of the next elections? We'll hear from Felix War on the IEBC, and I hope we'll be able to hear about, in very clear terms, where the problems are and what still needs to be done. Because the IEBC is engaged in self-denial and purporting to audit itself and not admitting to the massive failures that it was responsible for. So I want to thank you very much for having come today, and I hope that we shall have some very interesting, I'm confident we have some very interesting presentations for you, and also some interesting publications at the end. Thank you.